He opposes the travel ban. Gentlemen, great to have you here. Dan, what do you understand about how the new revised version will look?
Well, clearly they've taken their time, and they're going to make sure that they hopefully can draft an order that won't be attacked judicially. They're going to probably exclude Iraq, maybe for political reasons, and that doesn't really strengthen their case if that's the rationale. And then they're going to have, as you point out, a phase-in period, and because they're going to exclude aliens who've had substantial contact with the U.S. already, like green card holders or F1 visa, people who've been here for a while and who are re-entering, it's likely that they're going to try to confine the population mostly to people who've had no prior contact with the U.S. and try to minimize any possibility for legal standing. Now, that doesn't mean that it won't be attacked. We know the ACLU doesn't want to have any immigration controls, so they'll probably bring 50 different lawsuits to try to get one judge, as they did in the Ninth Circuit, to try to enjoin it. And, of course, ultimately an injunction can put the whole thing on ice again for a while. But we hope that it will withstand scrutiny.
Andre, you don't want any immigration controls? You want open borders?
Look, it's important to just respond to what Dan said. This is likely going to be the same pig with just a different shade of lipstick. Honestly, he said something that was really important. He said they took their time, and that's important for everyone to think about. Why did they take their time? It's purely for publicity. There's no security rationale behind President Trump's motives. He wanted this to have its own moment. He wanted his address to have its own moment. If this were really about the security of the country, we would see them doing this and doing it fast.
Dan, isn't that the fly in the ointment here, that originally when they did it, it had to happen immediately? They caused chaos at the airports because it had to happen so quickly for national security. And now, weeks later, they've delayed it week after week, day after day. So what happened to that national security risk?
But Allison, this is the whole problem with having judicial interference in something that for the last 100 years has been committed to the president and powers delegated by Congress as his role as commander-in-chief. Historically, judges never want to get in a position of second-guessing national security judgments involving things happening overseas, whether it's immigration or refugee admissions or foreign policy, wars, the prosecution of foreign wars. These things have historically been outside the jurisdiction of judicial scrutiny. Think about it. If ISIS-related terrorist operatives came into the country between when the TRO was issued in Spokane and now when they issue the new executive order, who is politically accountable for that decision? If ISIS operatives commit terror attacks who came in during this period, the American people have no venue for political accountability now. The courts have basically taken control of something that has to be within the purview of the executive.
Go ahead, Andre.
I mean, you really have to listen to what Mr. Stein is saying. He's asking for no judicial review of the president's actions over people's lives. That's really an incredible position to be taking right now, and that is certainly not the case. Courts have been more willing over the past several decades to take presidents to task. There's no complete plenary power over immigration, as Mr. Stein would like. There needs to be a judicial tech. That's the country that we need. And this is just pure fear tactics. That's what Mr. Stein wants. He wants there just to be fear. And with fear, we see how easy it is to elect someone.
But Andre, let me stick with you for a second, because what we understand from our reporting that legal permanent residents, meaning green card holders, will be exempt, visa holders exempt. They will avoid prioritizing any religious minorities, and there'll be a phase-in period so it doesn't all happen sort of immediately and cause chaos.
And Allison Camerata.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to your new day. It is Monday, March 6th, 8 o'clock in the East. FBI Director James Comey calling on the Justice Department to publicly deny President Trump's claim that President Obama had him wiretapped. Mr. Trump offering no evidence, but still demanding Congress that he investigate his predecessor for what he calls, quote, executive abuses.
So did President Trump really call President Obama bad or sick without any basis? Democrats say, yes, he did. Now, this is a toxic distraction from legit Russia questions. It is certainly distracting from a focus on jobs and taxes and even the travel ban that was said to be an urgent need. We haven't heard about it for weeks. Might that change today? Day 46 of Donald Trump's presidency begins with senior Washington correspondent Joe Johns live at the White House. Joe.
Good morning, Chris. The White House this morning is not backing away from the president's wiretapping claim. The takeaway from here is that the president firmly believes it happened and that it needs to be tested and investigated, despite the fact that it's been contradicted by a former director of national intelligence and the FBI. President Trump's unfounded claim that former President Obama ordered his phones to be wiretapped in the midst of last year's election coming under fire. Sources say the FBI is now asking the Justice Department to publicly refute the allegations, but so far the Justice Department has remained silent. Such wiretapping of a U.S. citizen's phones would be illegal or require a court order under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, who spearheaded the investigation into Russia's meddling in the election, giving a firm no to any such claim of wiretapping.
For the part of the national security apparatus that I oversaw as DNI, there was no such wiretap activity mounted against the president-elect at the time or as a candidate or against his campaign.
Multiple former senior U.S. officials dismissing President Trump's allegation, calling it nonsense, and a spokesman for Mr. Obama says it's simply false. But without providing any evidence, the White House is doubling down, calling for a congressional investigation to determine whether executive branch investigative powers were abused.
I think he's made very clear what he believes. I think the bigger story isn't who reported it, but is it true?
White House officials say the president's sources on the incendiary claim come from conservative media, not from government sources. In fact, there are zero publicly known credible reports to back up Mr. Trump's claim. His allegations coming in a familiar form, a series of furious tweets early Saturday morning from his home in Florida, in which he called former President Obama a bad or sick guy. His top advisors far away in Washington. This is not the president's first time repeating unsubstantiated allegations. Just after his own inauguration, Mr. Trump alleged that millions of fraudulent votes were cast during the election without proof.
When you look at the people that are registered, dead, illegal, and two states.
The president called for an investigation, but one has yet to be conducted.
I'm not sure what it is he is talking about.
This latest allegation of wiretapping leaving some Republicans confused, as top Democrats call the Twitter outburst a complete distraction.
The president, is the deflector in chief.
An intentional move to stir focus away from the deepening concerns over connections between a handful of the president's advisors and Russians.
I think this is just a distraction to distract from this very, very serious interference by a foreign power on our democracy. The question of whether Trump World, his campaign, his business associates had anything to do with it.
The president did arrive back here at the White House last night after spending the weekend at his home in Mar-a-Lago. Now, the president does have a busy day ahead of meetings with cabinet members. Chris, back to you.
Joe Johns, thank you very much. The White House is also supposed to be bringing its controversial travel ban back any day now. Moments ago, President Trump's senior advisor, Kellyanne Conway, said a new executive order will be signed today. What's it going to look like? Let's bring in CNN Justice reporter Laura Jarrett live from Washington. What do you got?
Well, Chris, there are some pretty big changes in store for the president's new executive order. The most significant change is that legal permanent residents, green card holders, so to speak, and current visa holders will be completely excluded from the order. So they will be able to travel as normal, just as it was before. But even with these changes, we are hearing from immigration lawyers that it's still safe to expect a flurry of action in the courts after this new order is signed, Chris.
All right, so you have one part of the legal challenge was whom does it affect? You have a couple of other ones, which countries, and you have why it's needed at all. But let's deal with the countries because there might be some news there. Maybe a different list than the 7 countries we saw before. How so?
That's right. So we heard that several top members of the president's cabinet, including the Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, specifically wanted Iraq removed from the list of previously banned countries for diplomatic reasons, including Iraq's role in fighting ISIS. So we're going to have to look to see exactly how that is detailed in the new executive order.
Yeah, we heard that from several sources, that there was a lot of umbrage on the Iraqi part, that they felt this was disrespectful, that had to be put into the balance. So in terms of the delay and what that means in arguing the need, the urgent need, the imminent threat need, how's that playing out right now with your sources?
Well, it's going to be fascinating just to see how this actually plays out in court, because to the extent that the administration took over a month to rewrite this travel ban to comply with a court order, that judge in Seattle who put a temporary hold on it, no one's going to blame them for trying to get it right legally. But if in fact they delayed the rollout for some other political reason having to do with the speech or otherwise, then that could come back to bite them the minute a government lawyer starts using words like emergency or urgency or the like in court again, Chris.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the report.